Hi guys, and welcome to today's video. For today's video guys, I wanted to bring you guys more of a special case situation, a bit like when I did my Bazi video. I had a lot of feedback on that video, and there are different subjects that I want to cover in regards to what I refer to as archaic illegal practices that still happen around the world. And so I wanted to do a video about another illegal, unacceptable practice that still occurs today in 2024. And that is FGM, or female genital mutilation. Now, this video, I'm going to be honest, may be uncomfortable, shocking, and upsetting to some people. So I just want to make you aware of that before I discuss this today. I actually remember, guys, coming across a documentary when I was about 6 years old that I probably shouldn't have come across, but I still remember it to this day, even though I'm 42, because I think I was flicking through the channels. My mum was in the kitchen making some dinner or something, and I think the 6 o'clock news must have come on. This is in the 80s, and I didn't want to watch that. I think it was after Neighbours or something, or Neighbours or Home and Away or something. So I was flicking through the channels, I remember it, and I must have clicked, I think at that time, probably on BBC Two, because they used to have a lot of documentaries, and it just so happens it was one about FGM. And I remember seeing that documentary, and at the time I didn't understand obviously what FGM was. I was about 6 years old, but I still remember some of the images, and then much later when I became older I understood, oh, that was actually FGM. And I think one of the reasons I remember it is because it was taking place in Israel. For those of you that have been on my channel a while, you are going to know that I'm mixed Israeli Jewish. On my mother's side we're Jewish. I'm a practicing Jew, conservative practicing Jew, and I think that's why it stuck in my mind so long, because I remember it was in Israel. But until recently I thought, did I get the location right, as in, was it actually Israel? Because I was 6, I was thinking maybe I misunderstood the country at the time. So prior to this video, I did a lot of research on where FGM takes place, although I do have quite an awareness of what countries it still takes place in. But I thought, let me check, because I'm curious to see if it's something that was taking place in Israel around the 80s, which is when I would have seen this documentary on TV, right? And it just so happens that I must have an extremely good memory as a 6-year-old child and now 42, because it was actually taking place in the south of Israel in the 80s. The area of Israel that it did take place in, now apparently it's stopped since around 2009, which, to be honest, I mean, I can't say I'm shocked for a country like Israel and with the government that is there. But anyway, apparently the practice has stopped since 2009 in Israel, but it is shocking. I mean, can I say it's shocking? The Israeli government just don't know what, they just do anything. But it's still shocking that that practice was allowed to go on in Israel until around 2009, quite frankly. And there are many other countries where I think people aren't aware that this practice happens. Like, a lot of people who have heard of it or just had a little bit about it think, okay, it happens in a lot of countries in Africa. Maybe it happens in a little bit in Asia. But it actually happens in Europe as well. Like in Russia, it's actually not illegal to do female genital mutilation. Georgia is another country that does it. There have been cases in Bulgaria as well. And in the past year or so, there was even a case of a Nigerian politician who was living in the UK in London and wanted to send a child, I believe, abroad back to Nigeria for female genital mutilation. Female genital mutilation happens when, among girls, women, children, female, in cases where it could even happen a few days after birth. I've seen in some cases. Until very recently, quite frankly, I thought it could occur in young girls up to older women. But I've come across cases when researching this video that it happens to sometimes to 7-day-old female babies, which is absolutely mortifying. And it is the case of removing part of the clitoris, the labia, sometimes the hymen, with, I mean, I can't even believe it really, but pen knives, razor blades. It's said in some cases that anaesthetic is used, but I'm going to be quite frank. I have, in all the time that I've seen documentaries on FGM over the years and things I've seen about it, I've never seen one case where anaesthetic has been used for this. Quite honestly, I've never seen a case where there's any type of anaesthesia at all. There are people that say that it's done for religious reasons, and there is no holy book in existence that says that it's okay to remove part of a woman's private parts, which supposedly the people who do this to women and small girls say it's to prevent them from having intercourse or wanting to be with a boy or a man when they shouldn't be, or prior to marriage to keep their virginity, when in actual fact they are harming and assaulting these women and girls physically, causing psychological and emotional damage to these women and young girls and children. The consequences, I want to say, with female genital mutilation can go from, I can't even say mild, from less severe to the extreme. So in the lesser, least horrible cases, I want to say, if you get through it, and bearing in mind, I'd say 1 in probably 4 women that have it are going to have a high amount of pain. But yeah, when women need to go to the toilet, they then have a tiny little hole, which is maybe 2 or 3 millimeters in size, which isn't even the size really of a pin, which is horrendous. So you're then holding urine because you can't urinate properly, which puts you at risk obviously of urinary tract infections as well as general infections. If there's open wounds there that haven't been cauterized and stitched properly and whatever, you're going to be at risk of very high risk of infections or sepsis. When you have a period, you can't, you can't release your bleed properly as well. So then you've got risk again of infection, bloating, severe pain, risks, more important risks on from that could be endometriosis, infertility, and I want to say in the very worst case, and this actually does happen, death. And it's shocking that someone would think that you can just get out a razor blade and start cutting a small child in their private area with it. I don't care whether it's a practice from 10 million years ago or 10 years ago or 10 minutes ago. It's just absolutely mortifying. I remember when I saw the documentary, which was in Israel when I was 6, and all I remember is seeing these women that were struggling to go to the toilet basically, and they were in beds and they were in extreme pain, and I just thought, what the hell is this? I don't even know how I went to sleep after that, if I'm honest with you, but clearly obviously it's something that is still stuck in my mind to this day. And I'm just like, because we're in 2024, there should be a lot more awareness of this, because there are women walking around, even in European countries, that have had to undergo something that there are still people who aren't even aware of what this even is. The other thing that needs to be said is when these women have intercourse, so they finally get married or have a partner, it's said that more than 52% of women experience pain. And I'm shocked that it's not even 100% of women that experience pain from it, given the situation, quite frankly. And even worse, when these women give birth, because they've got like a 3 millimeter hole, you can't give birth like that. So they will have to have a C-section. Or in countries, if they're in a country which female genital mutilation is kind of like normal, I want to say, they'll have to give birth, and so that hole will then have to be cut further open to get the child out. And then when they've got the child out, they'll have to stitch the hole back up, but not stitch it up a bit, like stitch it back to its tiny original size, so that after you give birth, because for those of you that don't know, I'm sorry to be a bit gruesome if this is not your thing here, but when you give birth, you're going to bleed for another month. And so you're going to have this tiny hole which has now been restitched up, and you've got to get rid of this period after you've given birth. And honestly, I don't even know how a woman can even go through that level of pain. There is pain, and then there's another level of pain, and I feel like this level of pain is that another level of pain. One thing I often don't see talked about actually with FGM, which I wanted to mention in this video, is the risks of HIV. Now, apparently, some people have said that there isn't a very high risk of HIV, and I beg to differ that, because if this is done in a very butcher-like way, that's the best way I can describe it, with a razor blade, and you have used that razor blade on multiple women or girls, you are then potentially increasing that risk of HIV to each girl that you then continue to use it on. Because if you're not throwing that razor blade away, you're not sterilising it, you just continue to use it, well then there is a risk of HIV or other conditions, maybe Hep C or something like that. So I'm shocked that there is not more awareness made of things like that, because yeah, pen knives, razors, things like that aren't sterilised, well, there is going to be some form of risk of potential HIV or hepatitis C. So I don't even understand how that's not talked about, honestly. And it's very interesting that in a lot of these countries where FGM is still practiced and people have a lot of children, or it's promoted to multiply and have a lot of children, that these women, after undergoing FGM, often can't have children. They become infertile or have some form of infertility. They have endometriosis, which is again a condition which is extremely painful, I want to say almost beyond painful for women that experience it. And you are then affecting someone's fertility by cutting out part of their private parts and essentially affecting their future of being able to potentially have children, if they of course want to have children. So you've taken their legal right and biological right away from them to potentially ever have children. And is it really worth committing the act of female genital mutilation to potentially cause someone to have infertility, endometriosis, sepsis, or cause their death? Was it really worth getting that razor blade and doing that? No, it wasn't. If you ever see a documentary about this, I feel like even then it's like you can never fully absorb what these women or children have had to go through. And also psychologically, I mean, often after going through something like that, you're going to have anxiety, depression, PTSD. I aside from the ongoing pain, of course, I mean, there are so many impacts onto someone's life. There are women that have gone through this as young girls, and it's only when they become much older as adults and they go out into the world that they realise what has actually been done to them, or they try to have kids and now they suddenly realise they can't have kids. And this is the reasoning behind why they can't have children, or why they're suffering in pain every month because of this FGM. In the UK, with the NHS, and to be honest, I am not a huge fan of the NHS, but one thing I will say is in the UK it has some of the strictest laws around FGM, which is one good thing about this country, to be honest. And in cases where women, for example, go to hospital, they might need to go to hospital for a checkup or something, and FGM is discovered by a nurse, a doctor, a clinical member of staff, it has to be like logged on the patient's NHS file and reported. And if that is the case, and they are able to, as in the police are then able to trace the person who committed that FGM on the patient, that person will be prosecuted in the UK. And I believe that currently the sentence for FGM in the UK, I think, is 10 to 20 years currently. Especially if the person was under 15, like if the victim was under 15 when it was done, it's 10 to 20 years imprisonment. Other countries have 6 years, 10 years. Different countries have different sentences. But in the UK, I believe it's 10 to 20 years sentence. And it doesn't even matter if the FGM was done 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 1 month ago. It's irrelevant. If it was done and they're able to trace that perpetrator in the UK, they will get sentenced for it. And I think it's disgusting. I mean, I'll be honest, guys, as someone who's Jewish myself, I find it actually disgusting. I mean, Israel right now, Israeli government, I'm not the biggest fan of them for obvious reasons. Anyway, when I say not the biggest fan, they make me feel sick. That's been a long time. But yeah, you're a country that allowed female genital mutilation. And actually, there's a case. I didn't have enough information on that case, which is why I haven't done it as like a criminal case on my channel. But there was a lady from Sierra Leone who was an asylum seeker in Israel. This is only in 2022. It's not even that long ago. And she sought asylum in Israel because she was going to be forced to undergo FGM in Sierra Leone, which is why she fled to Israel, right? And the minister at the time, who's part of Knesset, which is a Zionist political movement in Israel, the current one controlling all this situation with Gaza, these psychopath people bombing Lebanon, yeah? She was involved with that political party. I believe she's still kind of in the background with them. Her name is Eilert Shaked. And she's a woman, and she was the one that put a stop to the asylum for this victim from Sierra Leone who was seeking asylum in Israel for female genital mutilation. And she said that there are many cases where, you know, as Israeli government, we can't just offer out asylum. We have to look at the whole case, and if we don't think the person's high enough risk, we can't just offer them asylum. And I'm thinking, why don't you undergo FGM yourself, minister of the Zionist party, see how you like it, and then see if you want to return this woman to Sierra Leone so she can have part of her private parts removed. Like, honestly, guys, I can't. And actually, in a high majority of European countries now, like France, the UK, Germany, places like that, if there is an asylum seeker that's in that country and is fleeing their country because of female genital mutilation, there is special laws in all of these different European countries where I'd say a high majority of the time the asylum seeker is going to be granted asylum, because FGM is considered like an assault on someone. It's a serious assault and it's an offence in these European countries. So there are special laws which permit these asylum seekers to gain asylum because of FGM. And Israel is not one of those countries, of course, because the government is absolutely atrocious, which we already know. Anyway, and places like Russia where it's not against the law to commit FGM. So yeah, guys, I just wanted to speak with you about this because, as you can see, this is something that still goes on in many countries. Some of those countries are next door to us. And it's quite disgusting, shocking, disturbing that women have to undergo this often. And up to this point in 2024, there is more than 230 million women and girls that have had to undergo this against their will. And this is not acceptable. Anyway, guys, before I become more frustrated and annoyed, I will leave this video here. As always, please feel free to comment down below, give me your thoughts and opinions on this. You're welcome also, guys, to leave me suggestions for more kind of special case videos like this. If you'd like me to cover, obviously, certain very unacceptable practices in certain countries, please leave some comments down below and I'll be more than happy to look into those as well.